In this part of the AutoRig Pro course, you'll learn how to build custom rigs from scratch. The basic workflow is to go to the ARP tab and from the Add Armature menu, choose Empty. Then from the Add Limb menu, you can start adding the so-called limbs. Limbs here doesn't just mean arms and legs, but any of the self-contained rig presets that AutoRig Pro provides for you. So the spine and the tail and the ears are all limbs in AutoRig Pro terminology. Here you can see how I can quickly build something that looks like a human rig with a couple of clicks. Then I can click on Match to Rig and see the final animation rig. Here the limbs are not connected because I didn't parent them to each other. But I can always go back to Edit Reference Bones and tweak the parenting or reposition the bones to change the proportions of the rig. Also in this mode, I can select any of the limbs and click on Limb Options. And here I can change these parameters, which will change how this limb looks and behaves. Especially if you've watched the previous videos in the series, this shouldn't be too alien to you. We've added custom limbs and tweaked the options already. I recommend watching at least the human and dog videos first. In this video, we'll go over the limbs and some of the related operators and settings. I'm not going to go over every single limb options, that would take way too long, but you should get a good feel for how things work. Then as a little exercise, we'll rig this simple humanoid model with ears and tail, which is a true CG Dive classic. And I'm also working on another video showing how to rig this combination of all mythical creatures. It looks a little bit ridiculous, but it will allow me to show all of these limbs in action. So let's start a new file. Go to ARP and create our empty armature. And the first limb that you will almost always add is a spine. So let's add a spine, and that automatically puts us in Edit Reference Bones mode. Something interesting about the spine is that you can only have one in this rig. So if I try to add another spine, AutoRig Pro will tell me that I can only have one spine for now. But you can rig even very complex characters with a single spine. For example, I've already tested it with the Centaurus and it works great. This spine will allow me to explain this rig definition option here. We have biped and multiped, and the default is biped. If I match the rig now, you'll see how from the front view and the side view, these controls are perfectly straight. Now, my bones are currently also perfectly straight, so let's change their orientation a little bit and match the rig again. And you'll see that the generated controls are still completely straight and flush, which is probably what you want in a humanoid character that stands straight. So when you have rig definition set to biped, that will create these straight controls, even if the spine has a slight curvature. Again, that is great for humanoid characters, but if you have something like a horse, for example, or a dog, or most animals that have a horizontal spine and match the rig, you'll see that the controls become very hard to understand. In those cases, just switch to multiped and you can click the match to rig button, and that will reorient the controls to respect the orientation of the actual reference bones. I'm going to straighten the bones and switch to biped again. If I select one of the spine bones and go to limb options, that will show options specific to the spine. A very important setting here is the count number. This will define the number of spine bones. Currently it is set to 3, and that is why we have 3 spine bones here. If I set it to 4 and press OK, that will create 4 spine bones. And that brings me to a very important point when working with AutoRig Pro, especially in the Edit Reference Bones mode. And that is that even though you're in bone edit mode, you should never manually add or delete bones. So for example, technically I can select the end of the spine and press E and extrude a new bone. I can select a bone and delete it. I can do this, but I shouldn't, because now if I try to match the rig, it actually worked, but you can see that it didn't respect the bone that I deleted. So I'm going to undo. Also, if you want to get rid of this entire spine, do not select everything and delete it. Instead, select any one of the bones and click disable. In my opinion, this button should be called simply delete because it will get rid of the entire limb. Disable kind of sounds like you will be able to re-enable it, but that's not the case. It simply deletes the whole thing. So disable and it's gone. So let's add another spine. Also, if you want to duplicate a limb, never select it and press Shift D. That will not work. That is why we have these duplicate and duplicate mirror buttons. They are grayed out because currently I'm working with the spine, and as we saw earlier, we can only have one spine in a rig. But these duplicate options will be enabled for other limbs. You'll see that in a second. There are settings in this menu which I won't cover in detail in this video. So just a couple of words about each of them. Init scale will apply the scale of your rig when you press match to rig. So if I scale this rig, you'll see that the object scale of the rig becomes 1.185. Now if I match to rig and go back to item, object mode, you'll see that the scale is again 1. But personally, I would just recommend that you never scale the rig in object mode. Legacy can make AutoRig Pro work like in previous versions of the add-on. Personally, I never use this, so I cannot tell you much about it. Secondary controllers can add nice additional controllers for squash and stretch, and you can choose the type of control from this menu. Some of the options, like bendy bones, are more powerful, but not exportable, and other options are exportable to game engines and so on, but they may have more limitations. For now, I'll just keep this option to none. Export will allow you to export your custom rig, and then at any point you can import it again. So it will be similar to these pre-built rigs that you get by default with AutoRig Pro. Importing and exporting have some caveats, so I may make a separate video about them, but I won't cover them here. Okay, let's start adding some limbs now. I'm going to switch the definition to biped, edit reference bones, and I may want an arm, so let's add a left arm, and we'll get an arm on the left side of the character. If I want another arm on the right side, I have a couple of options. I can choose the right arm, or if I undo, I can simply select one of the bones of the left arm and choose duplicate mirror, and that will give me the exact same arm on the other side. So if I undo, if I have tweaked this arm a little bit and choose duplicate mirror, that will give me the exact same arm structure on the right side. If I have a creature with more than 2 arms, I can click duplicate and move this new arm down a little bit. And then we have to parent things. So these 2 arms will be parented to the top spine bone, and this new arm probably to the second spine bone. Now if I match to rig, I'll have a spine and some arms, and they are connected together. As far as the options for the arm, probably the most important ones are the fingers. You can have up to 5 fingers like in a human, or you can disable some of the fingers if you don't need them. You can have finger IK as well, which can be cool, but not essential. Wings I covered in the recent bird rigging video, so you can watch that to get the details about all of these additional options. The other options I may cover in other videos. Let's add a leg. Again, you have similar options. You can add up to 5 toes or disable some of them. And a very important options for the leg is the 3-bone leg, which is essential for rigging animal legs, especially the hind legs. Also very useful for anthro characters. So let's press OK here. Duplicate mirror to have a right leg as well. I'm going to give more separations to my spine and make it into some sort of a animal and human hybrid. It's a good idea to check the parenting of this arm now. Now if I duplicate this leg and move it to the back and give it 3 bones, That will give me this additional bone, and again, this is essential for rigging the hind legs of animals. Parent, duplicate mirror. Let's see if these guys are parented. No, they are not. Now, if I match to rig, things will be looking good, but some of the spine controls are not well aligned because I have rig definition to biped. Let's just switch to multiped and match to rig, and that will give me better alignment of the spine controls. And now if I move this pelvis control, everything should be moving together. Might be easier to see if I enable the deformation bones. They show the structure of the rig. Maybe these legs should be parented here to this spine bone. That will make them react to this spine movement. Now back to reference bones. I can add a head. The head automatically has facial bones enabled. All of these small bones are facial bones. Now if I select the head of the character and go to limb options, the head actually doesn't have that many options. It has these skulls which mostly help with the weight painting. Not super important. What is super important are the facial options. So if I just disable the big facial button and press OK, that will remove all of the facial bones. If I enable it, they'll be back on. And I covered some of these facial options in the human, fox, and a little bit in the bird, so you can watch that. And I'm planning to make a separate video all about the facial features of AutoRig Pro. For now, we won't go into detail. If I have X-axis mirror disabled and select all of this, including the neck, and move it to the side, I can actually add another head. So I can have a creature with more than one head. And the head limb also includes the neck. It's interesting that the neck has its own options. So if you select just the neck bone and go to limb options, that will give you the neck options. This can be a little bit unintuitive, so you have to know which bones have options. And here the main thing that I can change is the number of neck bones. So if I set it to a higher number, I'll be able to make the neck longer. Let me disable facial for a second to make things easier and just pull out this head bone and then stretch out the neck bones. So now I have 4 neck bones and the last bone is always the head. So that will have the facial features. Let's parent the necks also to the spine, and now I can match to rig. And now things are getting a little bit busy here, but you see that the heads are parented to the spine. For the long neck, AutoRig Pro automatically generated this special control which bends the neck, so that will make it easier for you to animate long necks, such as bird necks and so on. We have the heads, and each head has facial features. Back to edit reference bones. We have ears. They are a special limb which you will most likely attach to the head, so you can parent them to the head bone. In fact, they're already automatically parented to this first head. They have settings for the number of ear bones. So you can have pointy ears like this or droopy ears like this. It really doesn't matter. You can do that with the ear limb. So if I generate, you'll see that the ears are really not that special. They are just a simple FK chain of bones. So if you have something in your character that is not an ear, but it needs to be a simple chain of bones, you can use the ear preset. We also have a tail, which is kind of self-explanatory. Anything that resembles a tail, you can rig with this preset. If I try to parent it, it already comes parented to the first spine bone, which is great in most cases. But if this tail needs to be parented to something else, for example, if it's a ponytail on the head, then I'll have to reparent it to the head. Right, and let's add another tail, which will be a real tail now. Okay, it's parented, so I can match to rig. And I have this tail and this, I guess, ponytail on the head. Speaking about the parenting between individual limbs, it is always safe to parent the end of two chains. So I can parent the end of the tail to the spine and the end of the leg to the spine and so on. And generally, all spine bones seem to be safe to parent things to, but sometimes, for example, if I try to parent this tail to one of the lower leg bones and then match to rig, in this case it worked, but I have seen errors when parenting to some of these bones, so keep that in mind. So here you can see that the generation worked, but the parenting is not really working. The tail is not moving based on the movement of the leg. So I'll have to parent it again to the spine bone. We also have a breast preset, and that will add these two pairs of bones. So pay attention to their name, and the one that is called breast 01 will be the main breastbone, and the other one is an additional breast control. When it comes to the breastbones, do not get too excited about their functionality. They are fairly simple. It's just a bone, which if you generate, will give you this half sphere shape. But do not expect any dynamics or anything special like that. I made the Centaurus model female on purpose, and we are going to use the breast rig there. So you can see how by just playing around and adding parts and parenting them together, I got something fairly complex. The coolest thing is how it all works together. And the final two limbs that we have are a spline IK chain and a bendy bones chain. These are advanced chain rigs. They can be used to rig things like hair, ropes, cables, snakes, tentacles, and so on. I still need to test these rigs and to come up with nice use case examples for them, and I'll try to have such examples in the Centaurus video. Now let's do some quick examples. A guy with 3 arms, tail, and some ears. Not a problem. Go to ARP, add an empty armature, biped, add a spine, add an arm, tweak some options if you have to, symmetrize the arm, duplicate it, and align it with the third arm. Let's parent things, add a head, no facial stuff, parent, add ears. This one is longer, so give it a count of 3. Legs, no toes, align, symmetrize, parent, match to rig, skin, bind. Oh, we forgot the tail. Back to rig, edit reference bones, add tail, align, match to rig, skin, bind, and now it's really done. Now let's try something more interesting. Spider. Go to ARP, empty armature, multiped, add a spine, add a leg, no toes, and 3 bone leg. Align it using volume snapping. Duplicate and align, duplicate and align, duplicate and align. Parent the legs to the closest spine bone, symmetrize, 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 add a tail. And for these tentacles, we can use the spline IK or bendy bones chain, but also the ears will work. Use x-axis mirror, give the ears 3 subdivisions, align them, in parent, match to rig, skin, click bind. For the legs, you may want to enable 3 bones IK. And that will make the legs behave a little bit more like spider legs. And that's it, done. Total rigging time 5 minutes. I hope you liked these little examples. Take them with a grain of salt. I cannot promise you that this spider here is ready for production and animation, but getting to something that pretty much works in 5 minutes gives you so much time to tweak things if you have to.